right, good afternoon, everybody. I'd like to call this meeting to order. Today is May 14, 2018. We are here to discuss the proposed fiscal year 2018 to 2019 operating budget, as well as the capital improvement program budget, CIP budget, also for fiscal year 2018 to 2019. Okay, Manager Lau.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to ask our head of our Executive Support Office, Mr. Robert Morita, to provide the board with a presentation on our proposed draft FY19 operating budget and capital improvement program budget. Robert?
Okay, so good afternoon. It's that time of year. It's time for the budget. Again, my name is Robert Morita, head of the Executive Support Office, and under Executive Support Office falls the responsibility for putting together the annual operating budget for the Board of Water Supply. Before I begin, also, I wanted to recognize and thank Stuart Wong, our budget program specialist. He does all the heavy lifting when it comes to the budget. So if you have really detailed, difficult questions, I'll try, but I'm going to look to Stuart, I think, for some of the detailed information. We are going to be presenting the fiscal year 2018-2019 operating and capital budgets. So we'll get through a few remarks. We'll go over the operating budget. There's going to be an entire section that we're going to focus in on positions and vacancies for Board of Water Supply. It's the predominant thing that differs in this year's budget to budgets of years past. Then we'll get into the CIP, the Capital Improvement Program budget, and then we'll wrap it up. So talking about the operating budget, so looking at year over year, fiscal year 2018 to 2019, revenues in both revenues and total operating expenditures. Revenues effectively flat, but a modest 2.7%, $2.7 million increase of about 1.2% over the current fiscal year. Operating expenditures, on the other hand, we are actually looking at a slight decrease in the operating budget itself, down about $5.7 million or about 3%. And we'll get into some of the changes shortly. This slide, there's a lot of lines here, but effectively what we're trying to show here is that as part of the budget process, it's a little bit like your checking account in that you have a starting balance. You have a beginning balance to your checking account. You have revenues, you have expenditures throughout the year. And in the end, what happens is that at the end of a fiscal year, that the monies that are left over becomes the beginning balance for the subsequent fiscal year as well. So for fiscal year 2018, we estimated the carryover balance to be about $20.7 million. At the end of, and we're in fiscal year 2018 right now. At the end of this fiscal year, we're projecting the ending balance to be about just under $100 million. And that became our starting point for the fiscal year 19 budget. And so after all the revenues and expenditures and everything is said and done, we still project a balance at the end of the fiscal year of about $32.6 million. Just showing the composition of the fiscal year 19 budget. You can see personnel services, which is all positions, any related overtime, retirements, that's at about 16%. Material services, materials, supplies, and services, that's our basic operating expenses there at about 20% of the budget. Equipment, only about 2%. Debt service, 7%. And fixed charges, which is electricity, our retirement system contributions, the health fund contributions. In that category, it's at about 16%, and the balance is this capital improvement program at about 39%. You'll notice that in there also, this is a new item in this particular pie chart, and we're calling it, categorically, we're just calling it waivers. Effectively, we're notating in the budget that we're setting aside, or we're recognizing that there may be waivers involved in the budget, and this is specifically the water facility, water system.
These are the proposed potential waivers for some charges related to affordable housing, homelessness, fire sprinkler retrofits for apartment buildings, and those are the main ones.
Thank you for that. So looking at it categorically year over year, again, fiscal year 2018 to 2019, the difference is year over year. The biggest change of note really is in the debt service category. Goes from about 31.6 million down to 21.7 million. In terms of the differences, I just pointed out that there was the biggest change was in debt service. There is a $9.9 million decrease, and that is primarily because in this fiscal year, what we did was we refinanced some of our higher interest state revolving fund loans. So we paid down debt so that we could borrow it back at a lower interest rate. So we're not repeating that approach again in fiscal year 19. So that's the difference there on the debt service side. We're going to cover the positions and vacancies shortly, but there is a $2.8 million increase for personnel services, $1.8 million increase in funding for water quality and treatment studies, about $1 million increase for funding of emergency road repairs, and a $1.2 million decrease for funding of, for the purchase of meters. Over time, what this graph shows is 3 years of actual expenditures and then 2 years of the current, including the current budget and the proposed budget. So what you can see there is that expenses are increasing over time. On the revenue side, as mentioned earlier, we anticipate that revenues will be relatively flat. We've been speaking about the coming water rates, and as you well know, that the first year of the proposed 5-year plan for new rates does not call for any rate increases in the first year. So the fiscal year 19 budget reflects that we're not anticipating any increase due to rate increases. And the FY19 projection is primarily due to stable potable water consumption in the near term. In terms of resources versus expenditures, what this graph basically shows is that revenues is basically higher than expenses, which is when you do a budget, that's all you strive for. So this just demonstrates that we're in a positive position here relative to our revenues. Okay, positions and vacancies. In this budget, and we'll get to it in a few slides down, but in this budget, we are requesting additional positions, net increase to positions over time. We have been asking for new positions in past budgets, but in the past, we have been able to offset new positions by basically using existing vacancies that were not being planned to be used anytime in the near future. So we were able to keep the net change to 0. But we've gotten to the point where we needed to come to the board through the budget process to make a request to increase positions in order for us to meet the plans that we set forth to get up to that 21 miles of pipe replacement. And we'll cover that very shortly. But just giving you a real quick history. During the recession years, which was roughly between 2007 and 2009, Board of Water Supply implemented a hiring freeze that reduced employee counts. The hiring freeze was in place till roughly 2012. And the department held many positions vacant in order to generate budget savings. Vacancies, we're well aware of how that works, but vacancies at supervisory levels, though, it creates this cascading effect that we're still seeing to today. Because basically when you hold supervisory positions vacant, and then when you're finally in a position where you can start to fill positions, what typically happens, and it's the approach of this organization, because we want to first and foremost try to promote within, but what happens is then when you promote from within, it creates a subsequent vacancy when you finally fill, and it just has this cascading effect. And it could go 3, possibly 4 tiers down. So if the act of filling one position, and if all you did was dedicate yourself to filling that particular position, it could take years, basically, to finally get to the point where you've finally filled all the positions within that particular tier. And the positions that we held vacant, it ranged from supervising positions, journey positions, down to apprentices. And it gets a little bit tricky too, especially in the trades areas where you need to maintain certain ratios of journey positions that can teach and supervise apprentice positions. So you can't, if you don't have enough journey positions, you can't fill your apprentices, and vice versa. It's a complicated task in order to fill those. As far as the budget process, all positions must be budgeted in the operating budget. So that's a given. Requests for new positions must be submitted via the annual budget. And as mentioned, our current practice is that new position requests require that long-standing vacant positions first be looked at or first be used as a resource. This is a colorful chart. You may recall seeing this before, but basically, it's the process in which we have to follow to fill positions. And we have Michelle Thomas, the head of our HR, that can explain a little bit. We don't want to dwell too much on this one slide, but we do want to explain the complexity, I guess, of this particular process.
Good afternoon, board chair and board members. I'm going to walk you through this at a very high level. There are a lot of different things that happen in the entire process, but I want to give you basically a general workflow of how this process works. You're going to start over in your upper left-hand corner where that green box is. Basically, the process begins with the division. The division submits a request for personal action to the Executive Support Office when a need is identified for a new position. The Executive Support Office reviews the request for availability of funds and appropriateness in the organizational structure. After that request is approved by ESO, the request moves to HRO, which is right here. And my office will review the request for any kind of classification issues that need to be addressed. After the request is reviewed by my office, and it will be moved to the manager's office, which you'll see right here. And he does his final review and final approval before we send it over to the Department of Human Resources. Once it's reviewed by the manager's office and also approved by the Department of Human Resources, we will run what's called an IDCE, or it's an internal recruitment that allows us to give the employees in the Board of Water first choice or first shot at being selected for the position. Those recruitments we run internally from my office, and the divisions would do the interviews and select the employee or the candidate based on the merit principles. If they are not able to select a person for that particular position, then it runs to DHR, and they will run an external recruitment. The external recruitment is also based on merit principles in the civil service rules, and if at that point that recruitment goes out publicly and allows for any applicants that have appropriate experience and meet the minimum qualifications for the position within the city and county of Honolulu, the state, and the mainland. When the selection is made, then the candidate information comes back to our office in the Human Resources Office, and we review that candidate's information to determine whether or not that person does actually meet the minimum qualifications. And if he does, then it'll go through this process over here, which is considered the suitability process, where they may have to go through a background check, health screening, things like that, depending on the type of position they apply for. And after that, then they would be actually appointed to the position. This process is very complicated and very long, and if it's done without any classification issues or any other situations such as reorganizations, on average it takes about 8 months when there's no complications at all to the process. However, if there are classification issues that come up or reorganizations that come up, then that process can take a lot longer, and the average is about 12 to 24 months. Did you have any questions regarding this process?
Michelle, is this a similar process that the other city agencies also follow in general?
That's correct, yes. Actually, the Board of Water actually is a lot quicker because we're able to do our internal recruitments, and we have a practice of promoting from within. On the city side, it does take significantly longer at sometimes.
So we have some delegated authority for the internal recruitment?
That's correct. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thanks, Michelle. So when we talk about positions, you're going to hear this a lot where we speak of authorized positions. And when we talk about authorized positions, these are the permanent civil service positions that's created through board action through the budget authorization. We also refer to personal services contracts. And these are positions used for limited durations that may be used for temporary workload staffing or to perform duties while a position is in the process of being recruited, because the work still needs to get done. And so basically it's a way to bridge the time that it takes to actually recruit a position. So we do make use of personal services contracts. I mentioned this earlier. So the number of vacant positions abolished to accommodate new positions since 2015 has been 52. Okay, so what I'm trying to say here is that the Board of Water Supply has been willing and able to go ahead and utilize existing vacancies. We're not in a position here where we're just trying to protect position counts in order to build up our department. We're taking a hard look at all existing vacancies, and as much as possible, we're looking to utilize any existing vacancies for new needs in terms of staffing. And so to follow along or to get towards the ultimate question of new positions, wanted to point things out that over time, the 714 that's represented here on this graph, this 714, that's the number of authorized positions in the Board of Water Supply. And so you can see going back to, well, even just to 2000, we had 714 positions even prior to 2000. Honolulu's population has been growing since then. Number of pipe miles that we have in our system has also increased since then. Same thing for number of services, the number of accounts that we have within our system. It's been increasing, yet we've been holding steady at this 714 authorized count. And then what this is showing here is that this is part of our water master plan, the water demand. So what is showing in the blue area is our population. So over time, over the decades, population has been increasing. We've been fortunate in that water usage through our conservation efforts has mitigated the water use, both on a total as well as on a per capita basis. And it did not necessarily follow this straight line trend of water usage over the recent decades. But we've been working with what we have and doing our best in order to stretch the value that our ratepayers get from water services. As you all well know, the Water Master Plan calls for an increase in pipeline work. We're looking to increase from about 6 miles of replacement pipe per year to about 21 miles per year. In order to do that, we need to staff up our capital project sections, which is our engineering and construction division. That section needs to increase in order to meet that increased workload. And in turn, the support staffing throughout the department must also increase in order to meet the demands.
Robert, are you
Yes, sir.
saying that if nothing changed, if population all of a sudden stopped growing, and if we decided to continue at the 5 to 6 miles per year of replacement, we wouldn't need any more staff? That the staff needs are only because of the increase in, our increases that reflected in the master plan?
That is, right now, that's the primary motivator, but it's not only tied to population growth, it's due to the age of the pipes that are in our system as well. So if we could stop pipes from aging, then perhaps we could survive with the existing staff.
Okay.
But
There's a huge backlog, huge catch-up that needs to happen.
One thing to keep in mind too, is pipe is probably the largest component of our assets, but it isn't the only component. There's the water sources, the pumps, the water tanks, and also the increased investment in alternative resource sources or watersheds and water conservation. So those are some of the drivers. But definitely pipe miles being replaced to have an effect on bringing main breaks down is a key component.
Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, so cutting to the chase here. Okay, so what we're looking at right now within our department, this is where we needed to bring this to the board's attention. So if you were to look at our vacancies for the entire department, remember from the earlier slides, we have an authorized position count of 714. If you look at our reports today, we currently have 181 vacancies. Okay, and so that's what we felt we were compelled that we needed to explain to the board this particular number and what we're doing in order to fill positions. So while there are 181 vacancies in the department, we actually are currently in process of filling 151. And they're in various states. Some of them are brand new vacancies that we are in the process, we just began the process to fill. Some of them are in fairly complex reorganization requests, which requires union consultation, and that takes a lot of time in order for that to effect. Some of the positions are extremely difficult to recruit for. The city is also experiencing similar things in the IT areas as well as the engineering, the specialty areas. And so it runs the gamut. Some are very routine, and it's just a constant churn. We have an aging workforce. The boomers are all starting to retire, and the number of retirements, we're starting to see that starting to accelerate. And it becomes challenging when you have such low unemployment. We'll cover that in a second as well. So what we would like to point out is that we do actively have in process 151 recruitments or position fills in the hopper, basically, which leads us to about 30 positions that we currently don't have any specific actions. But then some of these positions also are awaiting the results of some of the reorganizations. So it's a wait and see type of thing. We can't go ahead and take action on some of these 30 positions until the effects of some of the reorgs are complete. So it looks like a big number, and frankly, it is a big number of vacancies, but there is a rationale behind it as far as why that number exists. So the obvious question, so why does hiring take so long? You saw in the flow chart that Michelle went over, we do have to follow the city's process as well as the civil service process in order to go through hiring. While we can expedite certain things, we still have to follow all the civil service laws when it comes to recruiting. I mentioned some of our processes right now includes reorganizations, and reorganization sometimes involves creating new job classes. And because that's a statewide effect, it can take quite a while for new job classes to come into fruition. Mentioned reorganizations, and our two biggest divisions, water system operations and field operations, have a couple of reorgs in place right now that are going through the process right now, that are affecting a good number of positions. And so that's, once we can overcome that, I think we should see some of the numbers starting to change as far as the vacancies go. Current vacancy challenges, and we're no different than the state, the city, our sister counties as well. We do have difficulty, along with everybody else, in attracting recruits due to low unemployment, salary competition, and reduced benefits. And what I mean by reduced benefits is coming from a civil service standpoint. How now there's a mandatory contribution to the retirement system that didn't happen, that wasn't part of some of our older employees when we first came on board into the civil service system. Changes in health benefits, both for employees as well as spouses, things along that line. Engineering and information technology continues to be difficult to fill. Salary competition against the private sector is a big reason why. We talk about the unemployment rate. The red line is Honolulu. The black line is the US average. I mean, the US is down to about 4% unemployment, which is really good. But when you compare that to what Honolulu is seeing, 1.8%, that's an amazing number. And so that's what we are up against as far as available workforce in order that we're trying to recruit to fill our vacancies. On KHON, they did a story a little while ago about talking about the city vacancies. So even the city is seeing high number of vacant positions, and they're facing the exact same type of challenges in terms of trying to hire additional employees to fill their existing vacancies. So in the FY19 budget, as I mentioned, these are the positions that we are requesting via the budget. There's 4 positions in the Executive Support Office. One of them specifically is for, in our procurement section, to assist with the increased CIP projects that's hopefully going to happen in the near term. We have 2 for security and 1 administrative services officer position that we desperately need, I think, on an ongoing basis going forward. Human Resources is asking for a clerk, communications, a community relations specialist, customer care, 3 positions for their needs, capital projects, and additional mechanical engineer. Finance division is looking at 14 additional positions, and all of these are, this took a while. These used to be referred to, this water data collection clerk used to be referred to as meter readers. And it's not just a change in title, the duties did change. It's gonna provide the department with a lot more flexibility in terms of what these positions and the types of work that they can perform. But we are asking for over 14. There's a term here, LTA, limited term appointment. So basically these are temporary positions that we're asking for. So in this particular request, there's 5 permanent. We do know for sure that there's a permanent need for these positions. We're asking for 9 limited term appointments that we will continue to take a look at to see if those positions should continue in a civil service capacity or not. And then we have 3 information technology positions for a total request of 27 additional positions. So in summary on the positions, so we're asking for in fiscal year 19, 18 permanent positions, 9 limited term. But what's happening also is that with the creation of these permanent and limited term positions, it will result in 22 personal services contracts being eliminated. Because these personal services contracts were being used to make up the need to perform the duties that the department needed over time. And just to note, we did some research that we are asking for 27 positions, but bear in mind that the count of 714 positions for the Board of Water Supply has been in place since 1992. So it's been over 25 years that we've survived with that authorization. So we're going from 714 to a total of 741, which comprises of 732 permanent and 9 limited term positions. Before I jump into the capital projects, any questions? Yes?
You know, you're gonna ramp up the CIP from 6 miles to 21 miles, but you're only requesting 1 mechanical position for the capital projects.
Jade, if you recall, the projections on our capital program was a mixture of treatment system improvements, pump station improvements, water tanks, and pipelines. In the earlier years, we can anticipate the need to take care of those items, and we're going to gradually ramp up on the 21 miles to pipeline. So by the end of 10 years, we're looking at 21 miles a year from the 6. But in the beginning, we have some other, this big lump of other work that needs to get done. I'm sorry.
Oh, no, yeah, so what Mr. Lau just mentioned, you know, we've been moving in this direction for the last at least 2 budget cycles. And
Yeah, actually, if you go, Robert, if you go back to the other graph, the histogram with the CIP and the operating budget, CIP in yellow.
here we go.
Sorry, it's a while back. A little more. There,
With the CIP.
yeah, there. So Jade, if you look at here, the yellow represents the rate revenue funded CIP. So FY15, about 55 million, going up to about 58.8, 74.4, 120, and what we're proposing in our budget this coming year is 118.6 million. So what we've done is tried to right-size more our operating budget and push more money into the CIP. But it is a kind of good indicator that our CIP program's growing. So we do anticipate more needs. We have a lot of vacancies right now on our civil engineering positions in the organization that we need to fill, but we do need another mechanical engineer because especially in the earlier years, there's going to be a lot of mechanical, electrical work in our CIP.
Vacancy slide.
Okay. So just so you are aware, the positions that are being requested don't necessarily correlate to what is going to happen in the first year of the CIP. We are particularly working with the Capital Projects Division to create economies in that area by reorganizing the different areas and making sure that all of the current vacancies are filled before additional positions are requested.
And you can see here in process 16 vacancies to be filled in capital projects, which is the main division to handle our CIP program. So that includes engineering support techs, civil engineers in there too.
No, I mean, I'm just looking at, you know, if that's the base is already, the 16 is already at the base, and they're doing 6 miles, you know, replacement.
Well, I just say, you know, it's been about 26 years since we went from we're proposing now 714 to 741 authorized position count. Been about 26 years since we had the last increase there. You might see in the future as we're ramping up that we might need more staff, but we're trying to determine that we're trying to hire positions create positions as we need as the program ramps up. And we do have an implementation plan, which Jason's going to kind of go over in the next CIP presentation. We do project that our number of our engineers needs to get up to around, engineers, inspectors, engineering support tech, probably about 90 positions in the longer term. And sustained there about 90. Where I think we're at, Jason, is it about 60
We're
right
at
now?
63 right now, and yes, thank you for your concern about our staffing, because yes, we're concerned too. We recognize it's difficult to find engineers, and also construction inspectors are a shortage category, which we use heavily, so yes, we are actively recruiting. We started earlier because we need them at the journey level to execute a larger CIP.
Question. Do we do our own engineering in-house? I mean, you're not farming most of that out to private industry? As
Jason,
well
you
as
may-
the construction management?
We do both. We do in-house design, we use construction managers, we have construction inspectors, we contract with consultants for design work.
But the majority of the work is actually utilizing consultants
For design,
for design.
the majority of construction inspection is done in-house.
Why?
It's very difficult to find expertise in the private sector for work on the water system, and we are very concerned about that.
However, we are using CMs, construction managers, to supplement our existing staff.
Right, and what we found to be the best is to use construction managers for the contract management side and use our own inspectors, and so we're doing a hybrid kind of thing. It's
gonna
also-
lead to a question is, if we're gonna eventually get to 4 times as much work as we're doing now, are we just gonna do the same thing with 4 times as much staff, or are you making structural changes as to how we do the work?
Thank you. We have made significant changes within our division to improve efficiencies. We've gone over this with the board over the years, and we'll want to provide a recap to the board, particularly since we have new members. But yes, we've been working over the last 4 years, improving efficiencies within the division. We've implemented some new information systems to guide our work. We've introduced a new class of employees to our workforce, project coordinators. They are common in private industry, but unusual in government.
And they're a lot cheaper than engineers.
They are a lot
They're
cheaper
easier
in
to find.
engineers. They are paraprofessionals that can be used by our inspectors and our engineers, so that engineers have more time to work on their projects.
Thank you.
Inspectors have more time on the job site.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you. At this point, are there any more questions regarding the operating budget? If not, it's a good segue into the capital program. Any other questions on the operating budget proposal here?
Well, I'd just like to add, I think what we'll do is a follow-up maybe at the regular board meeting on the issue of these positions, because remember what I said about the 52 positions over time that we've abolished. So it's not a net number, so it's not like just one new mechanical engineer that we're adding. We've both added new positions, we've used those positions, effectively we've reclassified to supplement some of the needs in the critical areas. So what we'll try to do is, for the next meeting, is to get a recap, so you can see some of the net changes within the divisions, to see how we're moving, getting our workforce ready so that we can accommodate the accelerated CIP.
Right, thank you. Okay, well, let's move on to the CIP.
Okay, good afternoon, Chair Andaya and board members. Jason Takaki from the Capital Projects Division, here with the FY19 Capital Improvement Program budget. The Capital Improvement Program continues to be one of the department's most significant undertakings. The program represents the immediate needs for the continuous delivery of water and the operation and maintenance of Board of Water Supply facilities. This year's program is crafted around the Board of Water Supply mission of water for life, safe and dependable and affordable water now and into the future. And it is aligned with the department's strategic plan, the goals and objectives of the divisions in support of that plan, and the Board of Water Supply Long-Range Capital Improvement Program. As in previous years, the organization of the CIP is unchanged. Research and development explores new resources and provides for system improvement needs $4.4 million is proposed in this category. Renewal and replacement includes replacement and renewals to the existing water infrastructure. $92.1 million is proposed in this category. And finally, Category 3 encompasses projects for capacity expansion. $23.4 million is proposed for capacity expansion projects. Now, this table provides a matrix of the totals by funding sources and the project categories. So a total of $110.4 million will be provided from the operating fund. An additional $8.2 million is operating funds that will be appropriated for projects that are SRF eligible. And these can be funded through low-interest loans from the Safe Drinking Water State Revolving Fund administered by the State Department of Health. Another $19.9 million will be provided from the Special Expendable Fund. This slide illustrates the distribution of our projects around the island of Oahu as we manage and maintain an island-wide water infrastructure. This map is reproduced and posted on the far wall if you want to take a closer look. Now, similar to what Robert said about Stewart, who does all the heavy lifting for the operating, Mike Domian here from our engineering support branch does all the heavy lifting for capital improvement, for the capital improvement annual budget. Unlike Robert, I will not try to answer your questions. The division heads and staff officers are here to answer in greater detail about any project you have any interest in. But let me first provide some highlights on our FY19 capital improvement program. First of all, going back to Category 1, research and development, we will continue to use construction management services for selected projects to increase our capabilities and capitalize on training opportunities to increase in-house construction management capabilities. Professional project and program management services will be available to address one-time project efforts and to support our staff as we build in-house management competencies. And finally, we will initiate an effort to assess the condition of our transmission mains island-wide. This will be to make sure that we can avoid catastrophic failure and proactively address the highest risk components of our water system. In Category 2, renewal and replacement, we address the needs of the existing water infrastructure. Pump renewal and replacement projects address the needs identified by our engineers and the Water System Operations Division. Major repairs are scheduled for our Waimanalo 230 reservoir and the Wailaiki 180 reservoir, which is pictured in the background here. Improvements will also be made to extend the lives of our granular activated carbon water treatment facilities. We will continue with phase 2 of our meter transponder replacement efforts that are starting in this current fiscal year, and also continue our efforts to safeguard all Board of Water Supply facilities. Category 2, renewal and replacement, also includes the needs of an aging water infrastructure. Our largest asset is the underground transmission and distribution main system, and just under $49 million are allocated for pipelines. 7 miles of main replacement are scheduled for FY19 construction in areas including Moanalua Valley, Waianae, Lanakila, Hawaii Kai, and Pacific Heights. And this is in line with our target of 21 miles in fiscal year 2027. And so you can see where we are on the 7 is FY19. In support of our expanding pipeline replacement program, new pipeline replacement design projects will be initiated for 18.5 miles of water main to address aging infrastructures in areas ranging from Pupukea to Kaneohe to Palolo. Category 2, renewal and replacement, also includes the pertinences of a robust water system. In FY19, we will address fire protection in Kailua with a project to install almost 60 new fire hydrants. We will make needed improvements to the pipeline tunnel at Makapu'u and just over 400 plastic service laterals that have prematurely reached the end of their service lives will be replaced in Kunia. Finally, the capacity expansion category includes these projects. Metro 180 storage will be supplemented with a new 2 million gallon reservoir on the slopes of Papakolea. We will improve transmission capacity to Waikiki, initiating the design of an upsized water main along Ala Moana Boulevard. We will address the evolving maintenance needs of the water system with a new base yard in Kapolei at the site of the old demonstration brackish water desalination. I had trouble with this morning too. Desalination facility. And we will begin design of a new combination office building parking structure on the upper Diamond Head employee parking lot to meet the future space needs of the department. So in total, $138.5 million in the capital improvement program carefully balances the requirements of ensuring safe and dependable water delivery with cost-effective resource allocation. And as I said, our division heads and staff officers are here to describe in greater detail any specific project in the FY19 CIP. We'll be happy to answer any questions you have now.
Are there any questions on this proposed CIP budget?
These are all shovel-ready. They don't have to go through, they're shovel-ready, these projects?
Shovel-ready. They are in various stages of design. They are all intended for advertisement, at least, which is what they're planning, is to advertise in the first half of the fiscal year. As I'm sure you know, the capital improvement program projects are, there are a lot of variables. We're working to improve the predictability, but permitting and approvals are what really set the schedule for our projects. But yes, all of these are at the point where we're confident we can execute.
And if, shovel-ready is focused on more construction, not all of it, it's going to be a combination of design projects and construction
Oh, yeah,
projects.
absolutely.
So for example, there's main replacement construction in Honolulu Valley, Waianae, Pacific Heights, Lanakila, and Hawaii Kai.
Mhm.
Are the permits are approved and ready to proceed to construction, or still going through the approval process?
We're continuing that process. I don't think anything would be ready today. Not today, otherwise we would put it in this year.
But if you go back to the previous slide, I think on the map, graph to 21 miles.
Oh,
Yeah. So the 7 miles is proposed for construction during the upcoming fiscal year. So
yes, and, right,
we put out the bid and awarded for construction. And then design, going into design in the upcoming fiscal year for about 18.5 miles.
right, as the transportation director points out, we need to fill the funnel to make sure that we have projects ready. And that's why you see 18.5 miles, we're gonna start design on that much. But next year's capital improvement program, main replacement program should include 8 miles of main replacement.
I brought it up because sometimes they think they give us the appropriation, like we can go and start constructing tomorrow, but that's not the case.
Yeah. Sometimes the legislative part, they don't understand that the effort takes to do a project.
Yeah, that's an ideal that we continue to work toward, though.
Can you do the next slide? No, the next one after that. The Britannia Complex, what is that?
We are planning to build a new office building on that lot that's shown there, which is Mauka of the engineering building.
Do you have your laser pointer? Can you point out the lot?
This one.
So you have the small employees lot, so what we did, Ray, was we did a analysis of the existing spaces within the existing buildings. The main buildings of this building, the pump building, the engineering building, 3 main buildings on our campus. And we also projected out, we developed some space standards for, depending on your type of position, how many square feet for your workstation. And from that, we projected out what our future space needs are as the staff needs to expand, along like with the capital program needs to ramp up to a larger program over $200 million a year. What kind of staffing do we need to deliver that? We found that based on establishing new space standards and looking at our projected future needs for staffing, that we're gonna be short around 35,000 square feet gross. That includes aisle space, including the workstation spaces. So the idea here was to look at a small office building and start the design process for a small office building on the small employee lot that's above the engineering building. Maybe Jason, you can sort of point toward it with your laser pointer.
Yeah, this is the engineering building. So this is Alapai
the
Street
engineering.
here, and the street running between our buildings is Lisbon. So this is our building, engineering building here, and this is the lot. There's,
No, but what am I saying? Okay, that's Alapai. So that little lot there
yeah.
is the one that's with the cypress trees, standing up along there.
At one time, the board was considering developing the entire complex, redeveloping the entire.
Right, we-
Have you abandoned that as the board of
No, we
governors?
haven't. That's a very good point. So we have some options in front of us. So we did issue an RFP for the redevelopment of our entire complex, except a portion of the corner of Alapai and Baratania, which is EO land from the state,
Right.
executive order land. That failed to produce a developer. At the last moment, the last developer withdrew before we could negotiate. So we've retooled the process, and we plan to go out with another RFP, but with the focus on the open parking lots of our property, because the buildings are so historic.
Mhm.
First time around, none of the developers wanted to touch the
Sure.
existing buildings. Too difficult and too controversial, I think. But the open parking lots looked like they were great opportunity for redevelopment.
And you don't feel you're foreclosing the full opportunity by doing this?
It's actually only entering into the design stage.
Okay.
So the options now come up later on, and maybe in a year or two, probably 2 years from now, where designs are completed, it defines what we need in terms of a building.
Got it.
The options are either we can fund it ourselves by floating a bond and build it ourselves, or if the RFP is ready and we found the developer, we could put it out for a public-private partnership opportunity, have the developer build the building. We've already kind of defined what it is,
Or build a space.
and build the
within a
space
building.
for us and then lease it back to us.
Okay, thanks.
I think we have a committee working on this project.
Yes, there is.
Maybe
And,
member soon can.
yeah, I think we can invite you, we'll look into that, Ray, if you're interested, next time we have discussions. One of the things the consultant team pointed out, which includes an architect and an actual developer, was that depending on how it comes out, the project could be almost revenue neutral for us.
That's not good.
Where the revenue from the redevelopment could help offset cost of a new office building potentially, and pay for a multi-level parking structure that would
Yes.
accommodate our parking, plus the
That's good.
developer's need, and maybe some other office parking needs for the public or other employees in government.
Okay, thank you very
Okay.
much.
Thank you.
Anything else?
Any other questions? Members?
Otherwise, I'll turn it back to Mr. Morita to summarize. Thank you.
Robert will provide the concluding remarks on our presentation.
Okay, just a couple of more slides. And this is, I think, the biggest maybe takeaway from your position as board members, because as you get approached by friends, family, especially since we're going through the rate process right now. So what this slide shows you is these are the operating budgets over the last 5 years, including the FY19. As you can see, we did peak in the fiscal year 2017 budget with about $211 million as the operating budget. But over the last 2 budget cycles, what we've tried to do is right size as much as possible. So we look for savings and efficiency as much as we could. So over the last 2 fiscal years, we've been able to bring down the budgets about $25 million. But what happened was that, as we've been talking about it so much as far as the CIP budget, is that we've been now shifting those funds into our capital program to get our system to where we need it to be. So in that same time period where the CIP was about $81 million, over the last 2 years, we did make significant investments in the capital side, into our infrastructure. And that's generally the pattern that we're going to see going forward in future budgets. And I don't want to jump all the way back. It's going to take too long. But we had the pie chart that showed the debt service amounts. So as you're well aware, because of the investment in infrastructure that we're going to see going forward, there's going to be increased borrowing to stretch our dollars going forward. So just as a forewarning that you're going to see the debt service numbers start to increase over future budgets. It won't be a dramatic increase at any one given time. You should see this gradual increase over time, but just be aware of that fact. And we're more than open about that particular discussion. That's what we can anticipate going forward. And then final slide is bottom line. So fiscal year FY18 over FY19 rather over FY18, decrease of about $5.1 million in the operating budget, decrease of about $5.9 million in the CIP budget, for a total decrease of $11 million for the total Board of Water Supply budget, fiscal year over fiscal year. Any questions?
Questions, members?
Oh, yeah, process. How does this get approved?
Oh, so basically,
The
the next board meeting.
next board meeting, so what we'll
May
be
29th.
doing is, prior to the next board meeting, we'll be sending you a draft of the full budget, which is probably, it's a document about this size. This was last year's. So you have a chance to review it before the next board meeting, and where we're proposing at the next board meeting, if the board feels comfortable, to move to adopt. If the board has questions or would like us to go back and address certain things in the proposed budget, then the last chance would be at the June board meeting. It's important that the board adopt a operating and CIP budget for FY19 prior to June 30th. Or we won't be able to operate. Yes.
Okay, any other matters before the board today? Okay, so again, as Manager Lau mentioned, May 29th, 2018, we'll be looking to vote on this budget. If there's any feedback, please be prepared. We do have one more month in June to adopt the budget. And thank you today to Robert Morita and Jason Tukaki for their presentations.
Thank you.
Our meeting is adjourned. What do we need a motion? Motion to adjourn?
Yeah, so moved.
Second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. All right, we're adjourned.